Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Readings, where we've been rocking on through the unique reference book, A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious by Rabbi Pinhas Taylor. And today we're going to be busting from mysterious powers into mysterious places, where we're going to be discussing extrasensory phenomena, and then we're going to get into the location of the Garden of Eden. Are you guys receiving this stream okay? Somebody give me a shout on YouTube, because somebody had changed the stream settings, and I had to change it at the last minute. So I can't tell if it's live or not. And anyways, I want to make sure I'm live, because I got a big, exciting announcement, folks. And I want to make sure it's on the recording. Nobody out there is giving me a shout back. So I'm assuming you guys can see me, because I've got the end stream and not the live button up here. So I'm going to assume that it's streaming fine. Okay, looks good. Thanks, Mike, so much. Okay. The big announcement of today is I got in contact with Rabbi Pinhas Taylor yesterday, and he's willing to come in for a Q&A session this Monday, the 30th. So we're hoping to finish the book today and tomorrow, complete it completely. And I've been asking you folks to write down some questions and to truly make this a successful visit from Rabbi Taylor. I'd love to get several of you on with some questions for Rabbi Taylor concerning the book that we've been reading. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So please, if you folks want to take part and ask a specific question you may have from this mysterious guide, you lost sound. No way. Anyways, sound's showing fine on my audio mixer, Mike, so hopefully you're getting it. But I'm going to be having a Zoom meeting this Monday here right at this time, and we'll be having Rabbi Pinhas Taylor with us, and I want to get as many of you guys on board with this as possible, so we can ask him plenty of questions. We want to make it a very interesting visit. It'll be his first visit on the Noahide World Center, and we want to make it successful. We know he's put a lot of work into this book, and have you got the sound back, Mike? It's so hard to tell. I mean, my audio mixer seems to be fine, Mike, so I don't want to everything's showing connected, everything's showing playing fine. The sound's coming through on my end. Okay. So thanks, Sheila Etzel. She's confirmed she's got sound as well. So we're going to break right in. So that's the big, exciting news, folks. We're going to be talking today about extrasensory phenomena, and then breaking into the location of the Garden of Eden. And, I'm always looking for the next best thing that we can share. Today I found online, there's a gentleman out there, Aaron Yaakov Lieberman, who has a new book out called Shmoy Shel Moshiach. It's an in-depth insight into the sugya of Moshiach min Hamaism from Hazal and Rishonim. It basically covers all kinds of details about the Jewish position of Mashiach. Is that something that might interest you folks? Maybe we can read that. There's a free digital download I can send out to everybody of his new book. He's got lots of people, lots of endorsements coming from many rabbis, and it sounds like something that's very interesting. The topic sounds interesting, especially in this day and age. So if not, I still have that between God and man. And my friend down in North Carolina, I mentioned yesterday, sent me a copy, an Amazon Kindle book read of this one that she's recommending. But nonetheless, we want to give you folks what we want to give you some options, selections. This has been a unique read for sure. A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious. So let's break into today's read. We're going to be discussing on the back end of yesterday, which some people found very interesting. Mysterious power section. We got extrasensory phenomenon as the end, and then we'll be getting into the location of the Garden of Eden, which I'm looking forward to hearing what Rabbi Taylor has studied on that. Okay, extrasensory phenomenon, sometimes called ESP, refers to information that is able to be perceived by someone outside the realm of the five senses. These abilities are also sometimes referred to as PSI, and can include telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. A related phenomenon sometimes discussed alongside these topics is telekinesis, the ability to move objects using only one's mind. Shalom, Johnny Riggs. Good to have you with us as always. The background of ESP. These ideas and conversations about these supposed abilities have been around since time immemorial under various names. But the modern description and exploration only began in the early 20th century. The term ESP itself was coined by J.B. Rhine, a former professor at Duke University in the 1930s. He was one of the first scientists to conduct paranormal research in a university laboratory and established the Journal of Parapsychology and the Parapsychological Association. Most of those who believe in ESP in any of its forms think that everyone has the potential for it, but that some people are more attuned to their paranormal abilities. Many contemporary believers think that on some level, the human being has potential access to events or things that haven't happened yet in the physical reality. But every once in a while, the conscious mind picks up on this information. The case for ESP. Since these ideas would seem hard to chart, what are some of the reasons that would compel someone to believe in extrasensory perception? Part of our experience. Most people now and again encounter extraordinary coincidences. They might have a dream about a future event that comes into fruition and leads them to believe in ESP. Then there are many well-documented cases of apparent precognition and clairvoyance. For example, in 1898, Morgan Robertson published the novel Futility, also called The Wreck of the Titan. The story is about a huge luxury liner called the Titan. There are some uncanny similarities between this fictional tale and the RMS Titanic, which sank 14 years later and had not even been conceptualized yet when he wrote the book, and there was not enough lifeboats for all of the passengers. Additionally, both were described as the largest craft afloat and the greatest of the works of men. Both were described as unsinkable. Both had triple screw propellers. Both struck an iceberg, sank, and had many passengers perish. After the Titanic sank, many attributed clairvoyance to Robertson, although she just attributed the supposed precognition to her knowledge of shipbuilding and maritime trends. So this is that correlation versus instead of causation or actual ESP. There are many such stories, although some are not as well documented. Although they are fascinating to speculate on, their lack of controlled environment makes it difficult for scientists to validate the claims. Interestingly, though, contemporary research may be starting to experiment with testing extrasensory perception. Scientific exploration. Telepathy is defined as the communication of impressions of any kind from one mind to another, independently of the recognized channel of sense. Some claim that animals may even have a similar type of ability. Over the last 70 years, research has lent support to the reality of telepathy. When one analyzes the results of the Gansveld experiments as well as card guessing studies, there seems to be a fairly compelling evidence for the existence of telepathy. In 2005, a study investigated possible telepathic communication in connection with emails. On each trial, there were 4 potential emailers, one of whom was selected at random by the experimenter. 1 minute before a prearranged time at which the email was to be sent, the participant guessed who would send it. The results were significantly above chance. In 2008, there was a brain imaging study involving someone who was purportedly telepathic and a control subject who was not. An image was spontaneously drawn and then sent mentally to each of the 2 individuals. The telepathic one was able to produce an image very similar to the one drawn for him, whereas the control subject was not. The experiment showed that when the telepathic one was successful, the right parahippocampal gyrus, a region of the brain that plays an important role in memory, was activated. However, it was not activated in the person who was not telepathic. Instead, the left inferior frontal gyrus was activated. In 2014, a team whose members came from Starlab Research Institute in Barcelona, Axilum Robotics in France, and Harvard Medical School proved that telepathic communication is within reach. In an experiment that sounds more like science fiction than reality, 2 humans were able to send greetings to each other using only a digital connection linking their brains. The greetings were not spoken, typed, or texted. The communication happened between the brains of a set of study subjects, marking one of the first instances of brain-to-brain communication on record. For the experiment, one person wearing a wireless internet-linked electroencephalogram, EEG, would think a simple greeting like hola or ciao. Then this message was emailed from India to France and delivered to the receiver, who through non-invasive brain stimulation could see flashes of light in their peripheral vision. The subjects receiving the message did not hear or see the words themselves, but were correctly able to report the flashes of light that corresponded to the message. Imagine it as a kind of neurological Morse code. We wanted to find out if one could communicate directly between 2 people by reading out the brain activity from one person and injecting brain activity into the second person, and do so across great physical distances by leveraging existing communication pathways, said co-author Alvaro Pascal Leon, professor of neurobiology at Harvard Medical School. One way of viewing this demonstration is that it is as historic as Alexander Graham Bell saying, "Watson, come here, I want to see you." The first ever voice communication over telephone. Someday, instead of texting, speaking, or looking into a camera to telecommunicate, we may simply think our message. Skepticism. Some people are more skeptical of ESP. For them, this is simply because ESP is counter to the known rules of the universe. Others downplay the significance of ESP experiences because, being that there are more than 7 billion people on Earth who are constantly thinking, statistically, some of these things some people envision will line up closely with what actually transpires. Others attribute certain psychic powers instead to heightened intuition. In other words, some people are simply better at analyzing certain subtleties that are picked up unconsciously by the 5 senses, rather than actually having a 6th sense. Openness maintained. Even those who usually espouse a mechanistic or materialistic worldview have found fascination in the subject of extrasensory perception. One such example is Sigmund Freud, who wrote that it is incontestable that sleep creates favorable conditions for telepathy, and after describing an experience with a fortune teller, said that thought transference by unknown methods may have taken place. Additionally, famed analytical psychologist Carl Jung was an even more active proponent of paranormal phenomena. His concept of synchronicity was about meaningful coincidences, events that occur with no casual relationship, yet seem to be meaningfully related. These events hint at the existence of a hidden reality imbued with profound meaning, where the mental and physical realms interact in ways that conventional science cannot explain. He used this concept to support the idea of paranormal phenomena. Dr. Hans-Jürgen Essenk, psychology professor at London University, summed up the experiments of J.B. Rhine as follows. Unless there is a gigantic conspiracy involving some 30 university departments from around the world and several hundred highly respected scientists in various fields, many of them originally hostile to the claims of the psychic researchers, the only conclusion that the unbiased observer can come to must be that there does exist a small number of people who obtain knowledge existing either in other people's minds or in the outer world by means of yet unknown to science. Interesting. The pioneering computer theorist Alan Turing was a believer in telepathy and was also impressed by the experiments of J.B. Rhine. Freeman Dyson, a contemporary American theoretical physicist and mathematician, wrote that paranormal phenomena are real but lie outside the limits of science. He acknowledges that while many psi experiments were inconclusive in his view, he is open to their existence. Brian Josephson, a Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist and professor emeritus of physics at the University of Cambridge, believes in telepathy and is confident that quantum physics will help us understand its basic properties. He also reveals that there are in fact a lot of scientists who believe telepathy exists, but they keep quiet about it. This is just the tip of the iceberg of academics who are open to extrasensory perception. Interesting. Statistics and psi. Professor Jessica Utz is chair of statistics at the University of California and president of the American Statistical Association. In one of her speeches, she said the following about the evidence for psi. We're on page 333, Mike, if you're following along. Hi, Zakia. Good to have you with us as always. All right. This is what Jessica Utz has to say. For many years, I have worked with researchers doing very, very careful work in parapsychology, including a year that I spent full-time working on a classified project for the United States government to see if we could use these abilities for intelligence gathering during the Cold War. At the end of the project, I wrote a report for Congress stating what I still think to be true. The data in support of precognition and possibly other related phenomenon are quite strong statistically and would be widely accepted if it pertained to something more mundane. Yet most scientists reject the possible reality of these abilities without ever looking at the data. And on the other extreme, there are true believers who base their beliefs solely on anecdotes and personal experience. I have asked the debunkers if there is any amount of data that would convince them, and they generally have responded saying, probably not. I asked them what original research they have read, and they mostly admit that they haven't read any. Now, there is a definition of pseudoscience, basing conclusions on beliefs rather than data. When I have given talks on the topics to audiences of statisticians, I show lots of data. Then I ask the audience, which would be more convincing to you, lots more data or one strong personal experience? Almost without fail, the response is one strong personal experience. I think people are justifiably skeptical because most people think that these abilities contradict what we know about science. They don't, but that's a subject for a different talk. Interesting. Mind extension. There's an interesting question that is related to the discussion of extrasensory abilities. What is the mind? Where do the thoughts come from? How does the 3-pound mass of gray matter that is in my brain give rise to my felt experience of sensation and thoughts? How do purely material processes give rise to consciousness? In essence, does the mind extend past the brain? There are different schools of thought. Materialism is the doctrine that only material is real. Minds are in the brains, and mental activity is just electrochemical brain activity. The traditional alternative to materialism is dualism, that minds are immaterial and brains are material. Dualism makes better sense of our actual experience, but does not make sense in terms of mechanistic science. So materialists would reject it. Some suggest an alternative approach, that there is a field theory of minds. We are accustomed to the idea that fields exist both within and outside of certain objects. The field of a magnet exists inside it and also extends beyond its surface. The gravitational field of the Earth is inside the Earth and also stretches far beyond it. The electromagnetic field of the cell phone is both inside it and extends all around it. Direct experience suggests that our experiences are not only inside our brains. When we look around us, the images that we see are outside of us, not in our heads. Feeling in my toes are in my toes and not in my head. We see and hear things in the space around us. When we look at something, our perceptual fields clothe what we are looking at. Our minds touch what we are seeing. In this sense, I might be able to affect another person just by looking. My gaze can be felt. I'm sure you see this with a lot of angry people. They are very animated, and we get very, very good as human beings at reading emotional recognition. And I think many people out there have broken emotional dials that they need to learn to fix and dial back. Stare detection. Oftentimes we can detect a stare. At one point or another, most people have had the experience of feeling that someone is looking at them from behind, only to turn around to find out that this was indeed the case. Many people have also had the experience of wanting to make someone turn around by staring at him. In some martial arts, there are special trainings to enhance sensitivity to be viewed from behind. Detectives and experienced surveillance officers tell over accounts of a crook feeling they are being watched, even well hidden, even at a distance, and even through binoculars or security cameras. A U.S. Marine sniper in Bosnia reported that terrorist targets would make eye contact with the scope of his rifle prior to being terminated. He was convinced that the people somehow sensed his presence even a mile away. There are many examples from a variety of interactions that give a clear indication of this phenomena. In scientific literature, it is referred to as gaze detection. There have been a number of large-scale experiments in stare detection that have had positive results that were highly significant statistically. While we may not recognize every time someone stares at us from behind, we can relate to the idea that sometimes we just know that we are being watched. It would seem, then, that our perceptive abilities are much greater than we may have imagined. The Lubavitcher Rebbe explained the spiritual underpinnings of this phenomenon. The Rebbe writes that bringing someone to mind has the effect of arousing that person's innermost powers. We see that when one looks deeply and intently at another, he will turn around and return the gaze, because the penetrating gaze awakens the core of the soul. Thought has the same effect. Judaism and extrasensory perception. The Bible details how Hashem and angels use mental images to communicate with humanity. The projection of this mental imagery or information is comparable to a telepathic form of communication. Jewish thought discusses how different levels of divine inspiration can be achieved by the righteous. And we talked a bit about this in the 8 chapters, how piety leads to prophecy. The steps to attaining this degree of insight are enumerated and elaborated upon in various places. These gifts are attainable by any person, at any time or place, as long as the person makes himself worthy of it. A person with a truly elevated state of divine inspiration can be aware of future events and may even know the thoughts of others. Amazing. The Talmud mentions an account of Rava and Rav Hista giving the same lesson on one Sabbath, although they were separated by a great distance. The implication is that there was some sort of mystical experience or ESP phenomena that facilitated this. The Rambam suggests that the intuitive ability to predict the future is potentially found in all human beings, but varies in potency in every individual. With some, typically the righteous, this ability is particularly developed. He refers to the human experience of telepathy, which is more common than foretelling the future, saying, thus, for instance, you inwardly feel that so-and-so has done or said something under specific conditions, and lo and behold, the things actually did happen as predicted. The Rambam is saying that all of us at some point experience the inner perception of someone having done something in a different locality that turns out to have actually occurred in reality. A gift for the righteous. In Jewish thought, the soul is described as having three garments or means of expression: thought, speech, and action. These are the three realms in which the soul interfaces with the universe around it. Thought is considered the most refined, and its effects can be most far-reaching in impact. Thus, Rebbe Nachman of Breslov cautions one to be careful with his thoughts because something actual and vital can evolve from thought. Elsewhere he writes, be aware that there are those who are possessed with great qualifications in that they are able to effect what they wish merely by the power of their thought. Telepathy and other extrasensory abilities are emphasized in Hasidic lore as a gift that the righteous possess that allows them to communicate from afar and help another in need. Rabbi Aaron Perlow, the 19th century Rebbe of Karlin, places the ability of telepathy in the realm of cosmic unity, writing, when one reaches the world of thought, then one can know what the other person is thinking, as the world of thought is one that extends in all the worlds and in all people, while tales of telepathic ability are not exclusive to those of Hasidic ilk. There are quite a number of examples for telepathic communication in Hasidic lore. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. In 1750, Rabbi Pinhas of Koretz, a Hasidic master, sent a letter to his master, the Majid of Mezerich. He writes, many thanks for the remembrance that you remembered and brought me up on Yom Kippur. You should know that at that moment I am merited to be brought up in your holy memory. I immediately felt it here. It is also written that when Rabbi Pinhas of Koretz passed away, Rabbi Yaakov Shimshon of Spitovka knew about it by some form of telepathic means, even though he was at a great distance. Rabbi Yisrael Friedman, the Rebbe of Rushin, had the ability to sense the mental state of individuals within a wide area. Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak, the seer of Lublin, was said to have tremendous telepathic abilities. In fact, it is said that he had such tremendous abilities that he could see from one end of the world to the other. He couldn't stand to see all the suffering in the world, so he asked God to remove this ability. Even after this, he was still able to see 800,000 times further than the average person. Rabbi Mordecai Yosef Lehner of Izbika, a 19th century Hasidic master and founder of the Izbitza Radzin dynasty, is said to have had the powers of precognition, telepathy, and knowledge of distant events. Rabbi Yitzhak Isaac Yehuda Yakil Safran of Komarno writes in one of his exegetical works of the sensitivity of those granted telepathic abilities. Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe known as the Rebbe Rayetz, explains that it is possible to accomplish a great deal by thinking of another person. He writes that thought has no constraints and has no barriers. He writes that at any time it reaches the place it needs to reach. The Rebbe Rayatz told a Hasid that the Hasid was able to leave Russia because the Rebbe had been thinking about him. The Rebbe Rayatz stressed that with the power of thought, one can help another be saved from his place and situation, materially and spiritually. The Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote that while harnessing the power of thought to help another person is more evident and powerful in the righteous, it is not restricted to the righteous and is possible for even a common person. In essence, many righteous individuals are endowed with these extrasensory abilities to use the purpose of uplifting the world. They do this by refining the garments of the soul, in particular, the garment of thought. These refined garments then rise to clothe the inner powers of the soul, giving the righteous the power to perform spiritual actions inaccessible to average people. One contemporary scholar describes the process as follows. Raising the worlds of the soul is achieved when thought first rises to clothe the pure emotions. When the thought rises to clothe the emotions, then speech ascends to the previous location of the thought, and one is able to speak through one's thought telepathically. Non-righteous powers. There are, however, some people that are not righteous who still can have extrasensory powers. First, it should be known that many people who claim these abilities are in fact charlatans, either knowingly or by fooling themselves. Nevertheless, there are some people who have access to impure spiritual energy and actually attain these feats through magical means. This is forbidden in Torah thought. There are also those people who have some sort of extrasensory power, not because of having refined their soul garments, but sometimes because of the exact opposite. Spiritual compensation. It is like a spiritual savant syndrome of sorts. Savant syndrome is rare but extraordinary condition in which people with serious mental disabilities have some island of genius. That stands in marked contrast to the overall handicap. Usually the person will have ability that far exceeds the average person. A related rare ability to predict the future or receive telepathic messages may be accessible for some who are otherwise spiritually unqualified and deficient. Can the non-righteous predict the future? As mentioned, possessing any of these extraordinary or extrasensory abilities does not mean that the person is righteous or has any level of divine intuition. This is evident from the Torah reference to the false prophet. Such people may accurately predict the future or perform a wonder, yet formulate conclusions that lead people astray from the teachings of the Torah. The medieval sage, the Ramban, says that there are men who possess prophetic gifts, yet are unaware of the workings of these mysterious talents. To awaken this ability, they must work themselves into a trance by isolation. He adds that philosophers call these men kahin, meaning one who is endowed with the power to tear through the veil between past, present, and future. Ordinary men who reveal great wisdom. Another medieval sage, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, known as the Rashba, received a question regarding an ignorant and illiterate man who appeared to be stirred by a divine impulse and suddenly possess enhanced wisdom. Rabbi Aderet's first reaction was skepticism about such thing happening. However, upon receiving more reliable witness testimonies, the phenomena seemed more puzzling. Rabbi Aderet finds explanation for this occurrence in the power of imagination, which allows one to see outside of what is normally perceivable by one's senses. He writes of the phenomenon of people whose power of imagination is strong from birth but fades over the course of time, yet may somehow become rejuvenated. These people, known as kahin, behold true visions. The Rashba writes examples of reliable sources describing such people who were filled with wisdom and poured forth great and accurate knowledge on various subjects. The Ralbag writes that the supernatural gift for predicting the future is apt to appear also among those who are neither saintly and righteous nor scholarly. Experience has shown that even illiterates can achieve the experience of accessing otherwise hidden information. I've met my share of those. Just ask them, they'll tell you the wonders of the universe. He also gives examples of a child who was gifted with the uncanny power of revealing things known to him, but revealing things unknown to him, but known to the one who he was conversing with. In other words, the child had the ability to read the thoughts of others. Rabbi Abraham Zacuto, a 15th century scholar, also discusses the power of imagination, gathering such momentum in certain people that they can give authentic answers to all sorts of questions posed to them, as if they were prompted by the spirit of prophecy. This phenomenon, he says, could occur in simple folks as well. None of these accounts suggest that an individual who might possess these abilities should be constituted or regarded as anything special in spiritual terms. Finding lost objects. Beginning as early as the 12th century, it was somewhat common for German Jews to make use of extrasensory methods in order to locate lost objects. There was a case where a certain Jew who was regarded as a medium was promised a large sum of money if he successfully found the stolen money of another Jew. The medium was successful, yet the owner changed his tune and only offered the medium a small fee. This case was taken to Rabbi Yitzhak the Rehazaken, a Tosafist, who ruled that the original fee had to be paid. Rabbanu Asher the Rosh may have also permitted one to consult a medium in order to find a lost object. This practice was prevalent enough that it was mentioned by Pope Pius V as a justification to expel Jews from papal lands in 1569. This method of consultation was fairly common through the 17th century. There were definitely stranger times. Glimmers of extrasensory perception. Rabbi Emmanuel Skolkat, a more modern scholar, says that telepathy is not common but does exist, even nowadays. Rabbi Aria Kaplan, another 20th century scholar, writes that there are a number of Judaic sources that speak about meditation as a mechanism for attaining extrasensory perception. He writes that in the ordinary state of consciousness, ESP signals received by the mind may be overshadowed by the perceptual information entering the brain. During meditation, when the static or spontaneous thought images that fill our subconscious minds are quieted, extrasensory perception can be more readily discernible. Yeah, we tend to get cluttered in our brains, don't we? There are glimmers of telepathic and other extrasensory abilities available to people who share a soul connection. These are people who have a bond of love and friendship, as well as the connections between some masters and disciples. Yeah, that is experiential for sure. Love. Jewish thought mentions that love can create a bond that enables the lover to feel the joy and pain of the loved one in the same way that he does. It is even possible that they can experience each other's pain when separated by great distance. The special connection they share becomes the mechanism for a distant communication of sorts. In the Bible, the friends of Job, as we read, come from 800 miles away to comfort him after sensing his troubles. This may perhaps be the only example of open telepathic communication in the Bible. They sensed something was not right through unconventional means. And that is from Torah Shalom, page 93. But we did read the book of Job and had that mentioned as well. Rabbi Meshulam Fibish Heller, an 18th century Hasidic master from Zbaraz, writes that when one contemplates the image of a person that one loves, it is a spiritual extension of the person. When love for that person is aroused, the love connects and unites one with the person whose image is in his mind. When it comes to spiritual matters, distance is not relevant. Additionally, love only occurs between people who know each other. Each person's image becomes inscribed in the other's thought, and every thought is a complete structure. This works because thought is a power that is higher than body. It begins in the body and continues beyond it in every place where a person wishes to extend it. Master and disciple. Many Hasidic texts make reference to intense form of communication between master and disciple in the form of thought transfer, as well as the ability for direct transmission of trance states or other mystical levels. Parenthetically, it is noteworthy that modern scholars are not so quick to simply dismiss these religious experiences outright and have given serious thought to similar empowered states of consciousness and the abilities they confer. Rabbi Dov Ber, the Majid of Mezerich, says that there is a reciprocal relationship between teacher and disciple by way of visualization. When the disciple pictures his teacher in his mind, this causes the teacher to imagine the disciple in return. In this view, there is a psych connection between master and disciple. Conclusion. In essence, it becomes clear that we are not dealing with occult phenomena, as termed by some, but rather with practices associated with mainstream Jewish thought and life. Although these abilities are typically characteristic only of the righteous, they are relatively commonplace in Jewish literature. These accounts illustrate that there is quite a powerful unseen spiritual realm out there, available and accessible to the spiritually sensitive. At the same time, it is an eye-opener in understanding certain mystical phenomena of which we ourselves may have been privy. Well, wasn't that fascinating? That is the end of the chapter on extrasensory phenomena. Now we're going to move into mysterious places, the section on mysterious places, and he starts off with the location of the Garden of Eden, and I'm looking forward to this chapter. Personally, I hold to the early works of British archaeologist, what's his name? Oh, it'll come to me. Forgive me, I'm drawing a blank. When it comes to the location of the Garden of Eden, let's see what Rabbi Taylor has to say. I think this is going to be exciting. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. And if you have questions, please write them down. We're going to be joined Monday by Rabbi Taylor in a Zoom meeting, and I want to make sure that several of you guys come on board. So I'm hoping you're willing to come on board with some questions for Rabbi Taylor. We want to make this interesting. And if it's successful, it opens other opportunities for us. The Torah describes Gan Eden, or the Garden of Eden, as the place where Adam and Eve lived immediately after they were created. The original plan was that they would serve Hashem by observing all of his commandments in the garden. However, after they sinned, they were expelled from the garden. And the service of God was to take place in a lower, more physical state of existence. Gan Eden continues to exist as a spiritual world where the soul is rewarded for its deeds. There are essentially two ways in which the words Gan Eden are used in Jewish literature: as a reference to a physical place full of lush vegetation, most popular and known from the Adam and Eve account in the book of Genesis, and as a celestial dwelling for the souls of the righteous, colloquially called heaven. Often in Torah literature, the line of distinction is blurred as to which state of Gan Eden is being discussed, and the terms are used interchangeably. All of the sages view the story of Adam and Eve in paradise as literal, but at the same time they say that the incidents it describes are alluding to a metaphysical phenomena in the upper world. Yeah, I can't seem to get straight answers from rabbis on that. Do they believe it's literal or not? And the hardest part is when it's arbitrarily deemed metaphysical, and that just leaves you dry. It's like turning off the tap of learning. The events that transpired in the physical realm were embodiment of truths reflected in the higher spheres of existence. In essence, the Garden of Eden and everything associated with it, such as the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge, and the serpent, can be understood both on a literal level and in a more metaphorical way that conveys many mystical secrets. This section will focus on the terrestrial garden. Speculated locations. The book of Genesis describes a specific geographical location of the region, yet its cultural whereabouts remain uncertain. The Rambam says that this was an actual physical place and that in the future its location will once again be revealed. The Torah provides some clues as to the physical location of this paradise. It says that a river issues forth from Eden to water the garden, and from there it is divided and becomes the four major riverheads. The commentaries say that the river overflows and waters the garden without need for human toil. The names of these four riverheads are listed in the text. The Pishon, which he says is the Nile River, or the Ganges in India, which I don't believe. The Gishon, generally associated with Ethiopia, I don't hold that either. The Hiddekel, or the Tigris, and Perez, the Euphrates. Secular speculation. There have been many interesting suppositions regarding the location of the Garden of Eden. If one looks at a map, it is fairly clear that Ethiopia and the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Egypt cannot share riverheads. Engineering physicist Daniel E. Friedman suggests that at one point in time, all of these landmasses were together. Through plate tectonics, they have shifted, but back then they were adjacent to one another. Rabbi Yosef Shanai, a contemporary Sephardic scholar, makes a similar point as well. Some secular scholars point to the Armenian highlands for the location of the Garden of Eden. That's exactly what I understand it to be. Dr. David Rull, British archaeologist Dr. David Rull, his earliest material cites the tracking to the mountain of Hashem in the Armenian highlands. It's actually north of Mount Sahand and lower than Mount Sabalin, near Mount Ararat region. There's a valley on the eastern shoals of Lake Urmia, which is where they get the Armenian highlands locations. One of the most prominent theories has been proposed by Uris Zarins, an archaeologist and professor of Missouri State University who specializes in the Middle East. He suggests that the Garden of Eden was situated at the northern tip of the Persian Gulf, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers run into the sea. These conclusions are based on his research using information from many different sources, including Landsat images from space. In this theory, the Bible's Gishon River would correspond to the Karun River in Iran, and the Pishon River would correspond to the Wadi Batan river system that once drained the now dry central part of the Arabian Peninsula. Notably, this suggestion about the Pishon River is supported by James A. Sauer of the American Center of Oriental Research. He describes how satellite images have detected an underground riverbed along the Wadi Batan river system. Sauer identified this river as the Pishon River of the Bible, a river that flowed at the time when the climate was wetter than it is today. Speculations of Jewish sages. The Jewish sages speculated as to where the location could be. The Talmud says that it is east of the land of Israel and that the sun rises over it. Well, while other sages gave it other directional coordinates. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakash in the 3rd century CE stipulated that if the Garden of Eden is in the land of Israel, Bet Shin must be the entrance because it has the sweetest fruits. If it is in Arabia, then Bet Garam is the entrance. If it is between the rivers, then Damascus is the entrance. If in Babylon, the fruits of the south side of the Euphrates are most appealing, according to Abaye, and the fruits of Hapanya, according to Rava. Other sources in Jewish tradition teach that the gates of the garden are near Mount Moriah. It is written that Adam came into the world on Mount Moriah and that the garden was further to the east. Elsewhere, it is taught that the gates to the garden are at the cave of Machpelah, where the patriarchs are buried. The Abarbanel writes that the garden was originally in the land of Israel, and then after the sin of Adam and Eve, the holiness of the garden became centered on the place where the holy temple stood. I don't think that. I think it deviates too much from the text of where the river heads are. The Ibn Ezra and other sages write that the Garden of Eden was on the equator. The Rambam writes that it was located below the equator, 32 degrees south of Jerusalem. There is a fascinating account told over by the Rambam. He quotes ancient Greek medical treatises and the famous medieval Jewish doctor Asaph HaRophe, and tells of the wise Aspalkinus of Macedonia. The latter was accompanied by 40 wise men who traveled to India in search of the tree of life. They arrived at the site, but every one of them was killed by the blade of the revolving sword which guarded the entrance to the garden. From that time onward, medical science was lost until King Artaxerxes managed to reestablish it. He writes that this is the true and well-known story. Rabbi Abraham Mordecai Albert, a more contemporary scholar, makes an enigmatic mention about the location of Gan Eden, connecting it with the Bermuda Triangle. The quasi-spiritual location. Rabbi Yosef Albo writes that the Garden of Eden refers to both a physical and spiritual place. He likens the Garden of Eden to a human mouth. Animals and human beings both have mouths, teeth, and tongues to eat and drink their food. Human beings also use their mouths for a higher purpose in singing God's praises. Likewise, he writes, the Garden of Eden has a physical location, but is also a lofty spiritual level. Other authorities make reference to a physical Gan Eden below and a spiritual one above. There are indeed many references to the spiritual dimensions of Gan Eden. Rabbi Dovber Shnuri of Lubavitch asks why the Garden of Eden cannot be found on a map today. He writes that the garden was a quantum existence of sorts, a medium point between the physical and spiritual realms. Perhaps it can be likened to a personality which exists in the physical world but does not occupy physical space. One cannot point to a personality on an X-ray. Prior to their sin, Adam and Eve were living in a more ethereal realm. This is what Rabbi Goldberg keeps trying to reiterate. A quasi-spiritual state of being. Tradition teaches that they were beings wrapped in divine light. Adam's physical body was so elevated that it was comparable to our souls. Even the angels mistook him for Hashem. Before Adam sinned, his body was pure, and thus the Garden of Eden was truly fitting for him, as it is a place inhabited by angels. To further elucidate this concept, even the fruits in the garden were not fully physical like they are now. Rather, they were more spiritual, at least like the difference between air and dirt. Eating from the forbidden fruit of the knowledge affected a major change in Adam himself and the world at large. The Zohar says the reason that after sinning they realized that they were naked is because they had lost the celestial luster that had formerly enveloped them. Yes, Johnny Riggs, snake oil salesmen are plentiful in every shape and form. They now saw the world only with physical eyes and can no longer remain in the spiritual state of the garden. In that context, we could also conclude that Garden of Eden still exists on earth. However, we cannot see it because we are using mere material eyes. Jewish tradition teaches that during the Messianic era, the world will revert back to its original state, and hence we will once again be able to see the Garden of Eden. Notably, 2 of the 4 rivers mentioned in the book of Genesis remain intact. Perhaps this reminds us that even though the Garden of Eden cannot currently be seen, a glimmer exists of what once was, and we strive for the future days when it will be revealed for eternity. Well, isn't that amazing? And that's the end of that, all he has to say. I think he could have done a lot more in that chapter. But You can tell that with the very size of the work that he's put together in this reference book, it's a lot. Now, next chapters we're still in mystical places. He deals with Pangea and Atlantis and then into the Bermuda Triangle, which I'm going to try to knock off tomorrow, folks. Now, as somebody who has extensively studied geophysics and done a full film overwriting the theory of plate tectonics, I know I'll probably have some difficulty personally with this, but yeah, we may. Hopefully, I can get through tomorrow. But there's. Can I make it to the appendix? I think I can. The pace we've been reading. Oh, yeah, we'll make it to the appendix. Okay, so yeah, we will finish off the work tomorrow. But please, I want to thank you guys, especially some of you that hang around over and over and keep coming back more and more and more. It means a lot to me that you guys do keep coming back. And more so, I would ask, if you want to be a part or come to this Zoom room chat session. If you've got a question you want to ask Rabbi Taylor about this book, we want to make this a successful visit with him on Monday, okay, on our usual time Monday. And probably open the chat room shortly thereafter. And so I want to, it'd be great if some of you just reach out, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of the Zoom meeting. I'll send some out to some of you I think might be interested, but please reach out if you want to join the Zoom room. If you've got any questions for Rabbi Taylor about this book, A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious, something on these mysterious topics, we want to have plenty of questions to really begin to mix it up. And I think the rabbi will open up himself. He's a great fellow, well-spoken man, and you can just tell that even he writes as well as he speaks. Might be exciting, folks. It's this Monday. Thanks, Johnny Riggs. Hit that like button. Appreciate it. Anyways, let's call her a day for today. But tomorrow we'll be finishing off the book. We'll be finalizing the spot on places, mysterious places, and look forward to hearing what he's got to say. But I think he's done some great foundational research, especially these last few days have been just exciting. I've been getting good feedback from plenty of people, but hopefully you guys are enjoying this. So, let's call it a day, and let's aim to be back tomorrow to finish off this book, A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious, and let's get excited about Monday coming together at Rocky Mountain Readings here. We have a wonderful Zoom. We want to have questions for him, folks. So we're trying to get as many as possible. So he said that we're trying to get as many questions as possible. And I would love for each and every one of you to have an opportunity to ask your questions. So if you've got something please do let me know. And I'll make sure you get to Zoom. I would love to just mingle. It's when these things are successful. When rabbis talk about the rabbis, open up. With excellent rabbinical content. I mean, they pour their heart out in the amount of energy and research that Rabbi Taylor has put into this work is just profound. And if it hadn't sparked any questions in you, it makes me wonder if you're really following along. But I'm sure with how many of you come back regularly, it's great. I hope you're enjoying it and really looking for suggestions, going forward. But we have Rosh Hashanah coming, so even if you got a question for the rabbi about that, I'm sure he'll be open to giving you honest and loving Torah responses. That's this Monday, August 30th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, we'll be having a Zoom room meeting with Rabbi Pinhas Taylor. So we want to get several questions. So please, somebody text me and let me know if you guys got a question and you want to attend the Zoom meeting, and I will set up the Zoom meeting links and make sure that everybody who's got questions, is going to be in attendance. And I would encourage as many as as you can. I don't want to be left on there alone with him. To him, he's going to feel like I'm not doing my job or I'm not getting any influence. Now, I have let him know that several of you have purchased a copy of the book, which is just joyous. It's nice to see that people support and pick up that, and it's a good reference book if you ever have any questions down the road on such mysterious topics. It's not your traditional vein of thinking, that's for sure, but he has done very, very high and credible research and delivered it in a very beautiful package in this work for sure. So that's this Monday. Rabbi Pinhas Taylor will be joining us in the Zoom meeting for a Q&A session. So we need some questions, guys. So please be with me on this. Let's make it work. And I'm still going to be live this weekend, I believe, with Rabbi Chaim Kaufman and Rabbi Chaim Goldberg on Sunday. Rabbi Chaim Goldberg this Sunday is doing a specific Rosh Hashanah share. So he's going to, that'll be 8 p.m. Israel, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Our usual Genesis class slot. Rabbi Chaim Goldberg of the Noahide World Center is going to be sharing about Rosh Hashanah with us. So we know we get a lot of people from all around the planet in that Zoom room. And it would be nice if I can get plenty of people to come in this Zoom for the Monday for Rabbi Pinhas Taylor on this work, so we can ask some questions and really mix it up. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Hashem willing, and we hope that everything works together and opens up more opportunity to share some great classes with you folks. So I appreciate you all coming, and we're going to sign out till tomorrow, where we're going to finish off, knocking off this book, A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious. Hope you guys been enjoying it so far as much as I have. There's been lots in there, and I find this is going to be a reference book on the shelf for years and years and years to come. So I'm going to sign out for now, folks. This is Dan from Rocky Mountain Readings. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.